Dean and Andy, so good to have you guys back on again. Lots to discuss, per usual here on Sports Frenzy. But I want to first off by talking about the big game tonight, of course, being Game 6 of the Eastern Conference first-round playoffs between the Detroit Pistons and the New York Knicks. After falling down 3-1 in the series, the Pistons are won the Game 5 and now are set to play host to the Knicks for Game 6. What are you guys kind of keeping an eye on specifically going into Game 6 with the Pistons still on the brink of being eliminated?
I mean, for me, I'm eyeing the fact that my prediction should have been going to be correct tonight. Okay, I said Pistons in 6.
Yep.
They kind of let 2 games slip away at home. Obviously, Andy and I and Jack Doles were there on Sunday for that game, and super disappointing the way that kind of ended with the no call against Tim Hardaway Jr. However, what I'm looking for tonight is I think the Pistons have a lot of momentum. I think the Knicks are a little bit banged up. I don't think they're 100%. Josh Hart, Jalen Brunson, Towns even went down a little bit. So I think that the Pistons are in a good position to send this back to New York. And despite the fact that the Pistons lost those 2 at home, I think they gained a lot of confidence by being able to finish the game Tuesday night in Game 5.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool to get a win at home. They haven't done that in 9 straight tries. If they do lose tonight, 10th one would be an NBA record in history for the most home playoff losses in a row. So, and also a little stat from Jack Doles we learned before we came up here. It's been since 1976 since they've won a game actually in the city of Detroit at home because they played at Auburn Hills and before LCA. So, yeah, it's been a while since Detroit's been able to experience that. That's kind of what I wrote about a little bit this week is just like the energy was so cool to finally see an LCA, a playoff atmosphere like that in games 3 and 4. And they weren't able to get the job done and get a win, no matter what the call was, the end of the game or whatever. They would tell you they had an 11-point lead as well, I'm sure, if they sat down and thought about it a little bit and let that get away from them. So, I mean, the call needs to be made at the end of the game, but it is what it is at that point. I think what's really impressed me is what they did in Game 5. The fact that they were able to come back after having that, much of a low point in their season there. And you kind of think a lot of teams that are that young could just go roll over if they don't have to lead the whole game. They kind of started to let it get away from them there against the Knicks, but Cade was able to make some big buckets at the end of that game. Asar Thompson, what a game from him. We talked about him and Duran staying out of foul trouble a little bit. That's what happens when Asar doesn't get into foul trouble. 22 points, 8 rebounds. That was huge. So if they can keep that up and stay out of foul trouble, I think this could be the night they get it done at LCA. And I can't see this series not going to Game 7 with how much drama it's had.
And I think we all kind of want it to go at least 7 games because this has been one of the more entertaining series. I can speak as a Grizzlies fan that, it could be a lot worse for a lot of teams out there.
If you're an NBA fan, you want this to keep going on. There's no way you don't.
Yeah, because both teams are so similar.
Right.
And obviously we've seen it in every single game. They match up really well against each other.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the kind of what we talked about, how it would be competitive and this whole series to stay close. That's what it's been so far, and I expect the same thing tonight.
Absolutely. And, what did you guys kind of take away from that last game, Game 5? You both touched on the fact that there was that no call in Game 4 that really hurt the Pistons from at least tying the series going back to New York. They now have a chance to tie it back up going back to New York for Game 7. But, that response from that Game 4 loss, I mean, pretty impressive for Game 5 with the Pistons, right?
Yeah, to me, that's growth. That's kind of one of the things that you wanted to see from this team. I think, when you have a lot of young players, obviously they added Dennis Schroeder, who has a little bit of playoff experience, and they have a couple other guys, but nobody that's really, and none of them have played together in the playoffs, that's for sure. And I think going into next year, it's like, okay, they obviously turned it around. They had 14 wins a year ago, and they ended up with 42 this season. They made the playoffs. They got a playoff win. All that stuff's great, but I think if you end only going to 5 games in your first series, it's still going to be a letdown, I feel like, to them, and it's still going to be a letdown kind of to everybody else in a way, just because expectations change throughout a season. That's how it goes. And I think the way this Pistons team has played all year, you kind of expect them to make it a series against the Knicks since they beat them 3 times in the regular season. So to be able to come out in that game and not just let the Knicks do what they wanted and walk away with it and have the red carpet rolled out for them at home to celebrate and everything else, the fact that they were able to get the win and force us to go back to Detroit, to me, regardless of what happens tonight or in Game 7, I think that was already a huge mark for them moving forward, like as a franchise.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up something that JB Bickerstaff said Sunday afternoon at the press conference. He's like, this team is learning, okay? They're learning as they go. It's a learning process for them. And, one of the biggest steps is learning how to win in the playoffs. They overcame the adversity. I was unsure how they would respond in Game 6, to be honest with you. I told Andy and Jack, I wouldn't have been surprised if they lost by 20 just because they were so low and it's such a heartbreaker in Game 4 that I didn't know how they would respond. But, for a young team to come out and go into a hostile environment like Madison Square Garden and be able to, and then overcome that, they're up double digits again in the fourth quarter, and Karl Anthony Towns tied it again. And so my thing with a couple minutes left was like, all right, here we go again. What are the Pistons going to do? They didn't turn the ball over. They made a couple big shots. They got some stops, made their free throws at the end, and they were able to get the win.
No, and you saw a lot of the same kind of looseness pregame that they've had all season going into that Game 5 and everything. I think it just says so much about J.B. Bickerstaff and what he's been able to do with this team. I mean, it's really impressive because, honestly, you have a lot of guys this young, again, keep repeating it. It's just like they can fall flat in their face in that kind of situation after they have that low of a loss. Those guys seem like they're ready to go out there and play. They changed their mindset just like that. It was really awesome to see.
Yeah, like Thompson said, after the game, they had nothing to lose. And the Pistons don't have anything to lose. All the pressure is on New York. And to me, if we can push that game to Game 7 with all the pressure on New York to win at home, they're supposed to win this series. And once again, if the Pistons play loose tonight and bring it back to Game 7, anything can happen in Game 7.
Mm-hmm. And, we touched on it that we really want to see Game 7 in this matchup. But, could you imagine this time last year? The Pistons weren't even in the playoffs this time last year, but could you imagine kind of discussing, the possibility of this team pushing a New York team, a New York Knicks team with Karl Anthony Towns, Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, coached by Tom Thibodeau. Could you imagine this time last year that the Detroit Pistons would be pushing this New York Knicks team to a potential Game 7?
No, I don't think so. I think if you were to tell me that you did predict that, I would tell you probably didn't actually predict that. So it's impossible. They won 14 games. They had the longest, losing streak ever. So, yeah, it was just like when you lose 29 straight games in a season and, you only have 14 wins the year before, both those things just make it so hard to believe that it can be a turnaround. But NBA is one of those sports where there's only 5 players on the floor at once. If you have a really, really good player, it can change everything. And I think Cade Cunningham has proved to be one of those young budding stars. And he's done a great job being the leader of this team this year and kind of turning things around. Because like his methodical play and just the chill sense about like his personality, I think all that has really, really fit well with this team. And the rest of them have been able to kind of go around it. So.
Yeah, I think we expected the Pistons to be better.
Yeah.
And we had a healthy Cade, okay? Last couple of years when they struggled, they didn't have Cade for most of the year, those 2 years. So you had a healthy Cade this year. You had the same nucleus back. You added some veterans with Malik Beasley and Richardson Jr. So like Hardaway Jr. I felt like they could be better, but I think that they'd be pushing the Knicks here in the first round of the playoffs. No, I didn't.
Yeah, you sign people like Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway. I think you think that's going to like help you out a little bit for sure.
Yeah.
But again, another person that's just unpredictable is Malik Beasley. All the 3-pointers he's hit off the bench this year probably should have been the 6th player of the year in my opinion. I think that was unpredictable too. They've had so many people come and play, and Jalen Duren's been great. Asar Thompson's made huge steps and been one of the better.
Reed.
Yes, exactly. Paul Reed, what he's done in the postseason.
Big minutes.
It's just all these names. You're just like, where did this come from? So yeah, it was definitely unpredictable, but what a good surprise.
Pleasant surprise.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I know everybody's going to be paying attention to what's happening on the court, but I will say, getting to watch these Knicks games, especially in the playoffs, it's been fun when they show all the celebrities that are around Madison Square Garden. This might be, hopefully it's not, but this could potentially be the last home game of the playoffs for the Detroit Pistons this year. Who would you like to see at Little Caesars Arena tonight? If you had to pick some Detroit or Michigan celebrities that you think might get the crowd more involved, might get the team a little bit more excited, who do you think would do that for them?
For me, it'd be Eminem. I haven't seen it yet, so I've been waiting to see that. I know like he's a huge Detroit Lions guy, but it seems like anytime the camera filters to that guy, it just gets him fired up. Like Dan Campbell was kind of that guy last game. I feel like that was like probably one of the louder points of the game. To be fair, the Pistons were playing really bad in the first half of Game 4 when we were there. But, I would say Eminem's my guy.
Yeah, I'm going to say Kid Rock. Yeah. Kid Rock has been a Pistons supporter for many years. I remember seeing him back 20 years ago when I went to a game. So haven't seen him in a while, but, he's obviously a guy who is all about Detroit and Detroit sports, and so I'd say Kid Rock.
Yeah, if I could pick a sports guy, probably Megatron. I think Calvin Johnson would be super big, but me personally, I think if Tim Robinson were to show up, I think that would be pretty cool as well.
Yeah, Bob Seger.
Yeah, yep. See, there we
Bob
go.
Seger, Tim Allen.
Why don't we just
Tim
invite
Allen.
all the
I mean,
Michigan
all the
celebrities
Detroit
out?
guys.
I'm sure they'd be more than happy to have any of them show up. So, yeah,
Right.
that'd be great.
Yeah. All right. So from one playoff team to the next, we're going to be talking about the Grand Rapids Griffins now. They are in the AHL playoffs, the Calder Cup playoffs, looking to make it past the first round again after last year. They're taking on the Stars. The Texas Stars, and they played their first game on Tuesday. Things weren't going so smoothly for the Griffins, though. I mean, what really went wrong with that game one?
Yeah, no, it didn't go well for them. And honestly, when you look at the shots on goal, it was about even. They did kind of play with them the whole game, but Texas had a great night on defense and in goal. They were able to keep the Griffins from scoring anytime you can get a shutout, especially in the postseason. Says a lot about how you're playing right now, and Texas has been playing pretty good, but the one thing for me is Sebastian Cossa has been so good for this organization. He's obviously someone that a lot of people are looking forward to seeing. And actually, Steve Yzerman in his recent exit conference kind of said thinks it might be a little bit more time before he comes up to the NHL. I think when you've seen this, if you've paid attention to the Griffins at all in the second half of the season, you might have noticed some of that because he struggled a little bit since the All-Star break and he let 4 goals in. And watching that game in person, there were some great chances in front of the net. I don't think a lot of them were goals that were really all on him. But the point is in previous, games and series and playoffs in the past last year and stuff like that, they were able to lean on Costa to make some of those big saves and stuff. And he really hasn't been able to do that since the All-Star break. I think I'm not sure if it's, fatigue or what it is, but Jack Campbell, on the other hand, the last 3, he used to play in the NHL, so a lot of people know that name around the NHL. He's been kind of the Griffins' backup guy, or when they had 3 people, he was playing, one every 3 days. The last 3 games of the year, he won the final 3 games of the year for them in net, and he made 30 saves, 35 saves, and 31 saves. So hockey's one of those sports where you got to kind of ride the hot hand sometimes, and I think they will go back Sebastian Coach in the series, but I'd be shocked if Jack Campbell doesn't get the chance to start in game 2, especially when you need to get one of these wins at home.
Mm-hmm. And also kind of on that same side with the Griffins, going into game 2 now, what do you, besides maybe making a change in net, I mean, is there something else that they should be kind of focusing on, I guess, as far as trying to get this series back even and potentially kind of build a little bit more momentum to ultimately win this series?
Yeah, somehow, some way they have to learn to, find a way to put the puck in the back of the net, right? Because you can't go back to Texas down 0-2.
No.
I know there's a big lull here between game 1 and game 2. However, how are you going to respond? And I think the Griffins have the potential to do it. They have the guys to go out and try to even this series, but it's going to take a complete effort. It's going to take all 3 periods, and to me, it's a must-win game, right? You can't go back to Texas down 0-2 with 2 games, 3 games if it goes to a game 5 in Texas.
Yeah, no, I see it as, for me, it's their power play. All season it hasn't been able to really find a way to get going. Since the start of the year, start of the season, they got to that start that was their best in franchise history, and they were scoring a lot of goals. Hasn't been happening since. I talked about how Elmer Soderblom would be huge to get back. The Griffins did get him back. I'm sure he's trying to get his footing back a little bit with these guys, but I think the Griffins had at least 4 or 5 power plays. I don't have the exact number off the back of my hand from the other night, but they weren't able to score on any of them. That kind of says a lot about where they're at right now. I mean, when you have guys like Austin Watson and Dominic Shine and Elmer Soderblom that have played and had a lot of experience, all his forwards up there in the NHL this year, you'd like to see more goals. And they have guys like Nate Danielson and Amadeus Lombardi, who are both great with their hands and very, very smart hockey players. So I think you want to see more out of the power play for sure when it comes to this, because they already have a hard enough time scoring sometimes. Got to take advantage of when you have the man advantage.
Absolutely. Well, game 2 in that series is set for Monday at Van Andel Arena. We're going to be having coverage, of course, of game 2, and hopefully they are able to tie up the series. I mean, do you guys maybe want to offer up a little prediction? Do you think they're able to tie up the series, or do you think maybe they head down to Texas 0-2?
I think it's now or never. I think that they will win this game and get it done. I think that I trust Dan Watson to have these guys kind of moving on from that loss, and hopefully they're able to find a way to put some pucks in the back of the net. And I do believe they'll go to Jack Campbell in goal. I just think at this point you got to do something like that. I think he plays an inspired performance, getting the chance to play in the playoffs again. So I'm going to take the Griffins in game 2.
Yeah, I agree, Andy. I think they're going to make the necessary adjustments to be able to go out and get a win, whether it's 2-1, 3-1. Doesn't matter what the score is, right? They just have to be able to find a way to win, bring it back to Texas 1-1, and then see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, game 1 was just a feel-out game. They just got to – then they'll make the adjustments. They got to see what Texas is going to be bringing in that series. But, again, game 2 is set for Monday, and we're going to have coverage over on woodtv.com. Before we go, though, I really want to we kept teasing it, really, over the past couple of weeks, just talking about the NFL draft. Well, now the draft has come and gone, and I think it's time that we spend a little time focusing on some of the major headlines. Of course, we got a couple of Michigan stars that had their names called. We got to talk about the Detroit Lions. But first, I really want to talk about the number, really that entire first couple of rounds when we were waiting on Shedeur Sanders to maybe hear his name call. I mean, that was kind of a surprise. I know there's not really a whole lot of Michigan ties to it, but I think we'd be crazy kind of not to talk about just how this story has unfolded with the prank call happening, him eventually being drafted to the Cleveland Browns even after they took a quarterback in the draft already.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you guys kind of make of this whole situation?
I'm going to miss this, but did anything happen to the person who made that prank call?
Yes,
they got fined.
The Falcons.
Okay,
So I
got
guess it
fined,
was the Atlanta Falcons defensive coordinator's son. I guess he was
Yes.
able to
Oh
find the
my
number.
God.
Yes.
So they fined the Falcons, I think, $250,000, and they fined the defensive coordinator $100,000 for that as well.
Yeah, he came out and apologized in a press conference yesterday.
Yeah.
That's truly incredible. But yeah, I don't think that anybody saw that. I mean, we talked about we did talk about the draft like predictions probably 2-3 weeks ago now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it still felt like maybe he could go in the top 5. I don't
Right.
know. So it was just insane. I think if you're Cleveland, you're kind of looking at it as like they're the people that took Johnny Manziel years ago. Obviously, much different stories, but
Right.
both have a lot of stuff that come with them when they come to the team. They drafted Johnny Manziel. Maybe they were like, do we really have to do this even in round 5? But I mean, at the end of the day, the guy probably is a round 1 talent. I do feel like Cleveland had a very good draft, and they getting him in the 5th round, especially when they don't have a lot going for them after the whole Deshaun Watson situation. Good for them to be able to pull that off in the 5th round. Probably one of the better draft picks they'll ever have. I don't know, but it's still got to prove itself in the field. Maybe he isn't that good. Maybe there is a reason all these professionals passed on him. But either way, when it got to round 3, I was like, "There's no way he doesn't get drafted." So. Right. I was looking at it cluelessly, that's for sure.
Yeah. Were you also pretty surprised, Dean, just how far he kind of fell? Again, 5th round isn't too bad, but falling that low when many people had him projected in that top 5.
Yeah, it was wild. Like, I'm glad he didn't actually go to Green Bay for that first day. I'm going to tell you that. It was. Like, he slipped out of the 1st round, okay? Then you're thinking, all right, day 2, someone's going to grab him. And then day 2 goes through, and no one drafts him. So
I was thinking Dallas maybe, just because or whatever.
You thought he would just his talent alone, right? He was going to get drafted, and so like I don't know if there was some personal stuff. I heard he didn't have some very good pre-draft meetings with different teams and all this. Don't know because of his dad. Yeah. You just don't know really what the reason was because he's an elite quarterback. To me, he was better than what's the kid from Louisville, Tyler. What's his last name? I don't remember. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Like. He's better than him, like his numbers were better. So
I think he easily could be better than Jackson Dart.
Yeah, I don't know about that slide, right? And I think if I mean, we don't know Sanders, but like if you know like the boastfulness and a little bit arrogance at times, I think he's going to play with a chip on his shoulder. He's got something to prove, right?
Yeah,
like
for sure.
Kind of like St. Brown, right, with the Lions, right? All these guys were taken before me. I'm gonna put these guys down. I'm going to make a mental note of this, and I'm going to go out and prove myself and prove that I'm better than these guys.
No, it's probably the best thing for the Browns in that situation
Right.
to have him have that kind of chip on his shoulder because before the draft, it seemed like there were certain teams he was basically saying he didn't even want to play for. So I do think that might have had something to do with it too because these GMs talk to each other. I mean, that's like a part of it. And they're like, well, he's telling me this and he's telling me this, and maybe everybody believed it. So just one of those crazy situations you didn't see coming, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, the potential quarterback room for the Cleveland Browns, Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, who they also drafted in this draft, Kenny Pickett, 2 gloves Kenny, and of course 40-year-old Joe Flacco. So that'll be interesting to watch. But I did actually just find a Michigan connection to this whole story. The Browns also had the 5th pick after trading it with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they selected Michigan's very own Mason Graham. 3 total Michigan Wolverines were selected in the 1st round. Colston Loveland also heard his name called from the Chicago Bears with the 10th overall pick, and then Kenneth Grant was drafted by the Dolphins with the 13th pick. You guys like these spots, these landing spots for these guys? I think, specifically pairing Mason Graham with a guy like Myles Garrett, kind of helping out the front lines for Cleveland there.
Yeah, I'm not going to be the person to get into the whole cheating scandal, everything right now with Michigan, but when they keep getting players drafted this high, I think it just kind of proves a point that maybe they were that good 2 years ago. Because last year they went 8-4. I mean, they did end the season great, obviously with beating Alabama and Ohio State, but a lot of these guys, like, they were that good, and I think it kind of proves it. But yeah, I think it says a lot about Michigan to get 3 guys drafted in the top 13. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely think, Mason Graham, teaming up, like you said, with Myles Garrett in Cleveland, he has the opportunity to obviously make a starting spot, and try to get that Browns franchise to be better than they have been, right? Mm-hmm. But no, I was a little surprised that Will Johnson slipped out of the first round, but obviously he was picked up in day 2.
What's wrong with that knee? I mean, they must know
Right.
something that, like,
Right.
I wondered all season if it kind of was, like, more of a thing with him. Like, he just, like, got to the point with the injury because it was turf toe or whatever is what it was always diagnosed when he was in college. And it was kind of like, well, Michigan's not playing very good. Is he kind of holding himself out for the NFL draft? I think a lot of people had those thoughts. Obviously, no information on that. It's just what people have kind of been saying. And obviously, there's something out there because a talent like him to slip that far, that's pretty crazy. He's not somebody that was running his mouth. That's for sure.
Yeah. Phil, were you surprised by the Bears taking Colston Loveland?
I mean, I really like Colston Loveland. I think I am. I'm curious to see how he's going to fit because the Bears do have Cole Kmet and they have a ton of weapons already. I mean, is he going to maybe get lost in the shuffle, or is he going to have a breakout year because defenses have to cover all these other guys? So
yeah.
I think Chicago was an interesting spot for him, to say the least. But when you've got a quarterback like Caleb Williams, I feel like you kind of have to surround him with as many guys as you can, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, Ben Johnson did pretty well with Sam Laporta, so I do expect him to do well there. That's for sure.
Yeah, he'll be. He can get involved in the offense definitely, and he was the best tight end in the draft, and obviously he was a favorite of Ben Johnson in the organization.
A lot of people are making comments on his size too, like just in a lot of the pictures and stuff. I'm like, give this guy an offseason. Like, that's what just happens in the NFL. The minute you get drafted, he usually get bulkier and bigger.
Right.
So
exactly.
I think he's a great talent. He's only going to get better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, well, let's focus on the Lions a little bit and kind of what they did in the draft because I think they got a pretty good player, especially in the first round. They had a pretty decent draft, I would think. Mm-hmm. Kind of in tune to what we've been seeing in the Brad Holmes era. But Tyleik Williams in the first round. What do you guys make of that pick? I know he's an Ohio State guy. I know there were some mixed feelings there with him coming up here to Detroit, but another dominant defensive lineman to really help out the Detroit Lions in an area where they saw so many guys go down last year.
Yeah, like if you watch some of his film, just so aggressive, right? Like kind of like the Aleem McNeil type, right? He's just going to get after the quarterback and do what he can, and for his size, he's very nimble. He can get around the offensive lineman. So like I think that was a great pick, despite Ohio State. Great pick by the Lions in the first pick. You didn't have a lot of options there, right? I think there was a couple of guys that went a couple spots before the Lions were able to draft that they kind of wanted, and not they settled on him, but like I think it was still a guy that they targeted.
Right? Yeah, no, I think when it comes to if that's your favorite team, the Lions, and they get another good player, it doesn't really matter where they went to college. Yeah. It was like that was the most annoying when Aiden Hutchinson got drafted. Anybody that was saying that he wasn't supposed to get drafted there, I was like, he was projected a top 5 pick by everybody. Why does everybody think it's just because it's the Lions making the pick?
Right.
I'm happy with the pick overall from Tyleik. I think that's exactly what they do need. I think what people were kind of upset they didn't go get an edge rusher. Brad Holmes has been doing this since he started drafting for Detroit, and it's been working. Like the Lions put players on their boards. They take the person that they think is the highest on their board when they get their pick, and if they think for whatever reason there's even a chance that person could go, they're going to trade up for him and they're going to get him. And they've just done that consistently since Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have been the two people that have kind of been, talking about it and making these draft picks. So I trust it. I'm happy with it. I think that it's another great add to the middle, and it'll be exciting to see what they do. Zadarius Smith, if he is able to get signed back or come back, it'd be interesting because I think if you get a solid middle that takes more double teams off of Aiden and possibly Zadarius Smith or whoever the other edge rusher ends up being, that's a starter, I think it could make a lot of mayhem for other teams' backfields.
Yeah, definitely. And we touched on it a little bit about the potential of this happening, and it actually did happen. Grand Rapids' very own Isaac Tislaw was actually picked up by the Lions in the 3rd round. He was picked 70th overall. I mean, a really great story all in all, considering where he started from at Hillsdale College, transferring to Arkansas, getting invited to the Combine, having a breakout performance there, and now he's on his hometown team. I mean, just an awesome story there.
Yeah, I think I was more shocked. when we talked to
I think a lot
Jack,
of people were shocked.
we expect him to go on day 3, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of the late round sleeper, and we were supposed to be there at his house on Saturday, and then you turn on the TV Friday night about 9:45, and the Lions trade up, and you're like, who are they going to get? Isaac Tesla. So that was a surprise, I think, how early he went. However, I did hear some speculation that Buffalo was going to take him with their next pick, and so, like Andy just talked about, Brad Holmes is going to trade up to get his guy. And if you heard Brad Holmes talk about Isaac, he absolutely loved him. He loves his size. He loves his ability to block. He loves his hands. He loves just being a big target. Brad Holmes loved everything about him. And what was funny was Isaac told me the story about how he wore the Detroit Lions jersey, and then Brad Holmes actually brought that up in his press conference, saying, "Hey, I thought this was a little cheesy at first, but the guys, but he said he had it since the 8th grade." And so, like, he was a lifelong, obviously, Lions fan, but like Brad Holmes said that's not why we drafted him. We drafted him because of his potential and the things that we think he can do for us.
Yeah, I kind of have a question for both you guys because obviously they drafted Dominic Lovett too in the 7th round, so they got a couple wide receivers in this draft. I think one of the biggest topics of the offseason has kind of been about Jameson Williams, because they have these like 5 or 6 guys that are going to have to make money here in the upcoming years, and who are they going to pay? Does this kind of say a little bit about what they're thinking about J-Mo with that contract after maybe this season?
Well, they picked up J-Mo's fifth year option,
Yeah.
right? And I think they like J-Mo, right? And I think this is going to be a big year for him, right? If he has a really great year, they're going to pay him, and if not, they're going to look at maybe some of these other guys, like you said, that were just drafted and see what they can do in their rookie season and kind of go from there. So big year for J-Mo to kind of, prove himself that he deserves that big money, and then he'll be a Lion for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, I remember covering him when he was down in Alabama, just seeing just the potential there. I mean, he's one of the few receivers, kind of like a Tyreek Hill, that can just take the top off the defense at really any given point in a game. So I think you kind of want to have that if you're the Lions, just as an option. But yeah, kind of like what Dean said, you want to make sure he has a good year both on the field and off the field, kind of stay out of those headlines.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes,
when obviously
100%.
they just paid Kirby Josephs. That's one of those players I was thinking of. You got Aiden Hutchinson, who they're going to have to make a decision on. You got Brian Branch, they're going to have to make a decision on. There's a lot of players they're going to owe a lot of money. So it's kind of about, like, what do you want? To me, it is a little telling that they drafted, a couple receivers that maybe at the end of the season, maybe if he does play that good, I don't know if they're going to have the money to pay him. So
you're right. Well, let's see what they have. Because when you give Goff that big contract, and now what do you have
Jack
left
Campbell
over?
on defense too.
Right.
Like, they're going to have defensive players. They're going to probably need to keep. I guess it's going to be about what you think is, and exactly what you just said. Jared Goff likes these guys. I feel like last year he started to have a really, really good connection with J-Mo. So, and obviously, like, the whole drop pass thing that people were kind of worried about for the one on the field problem, he got away from that last year. He's in the top 10 in Pro Football Focus for the least drop rate. So, yeah, he's become a much better receiver, and I think he's a key part of the team. But yeah, got to stay out of the headlines off the field, and we'll see what they do, but it'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah, well, I know I'm really excited. Just watching the draft, I know it's only been really a couple weeks. I wouldn't even say months, but weeks since the football season kind of ended, and I've been missing it. So watching the draft was actually kind of nice. It kind of brought me back. And fun fact for everybody, we are only 126 days away from the NFL kicking off again. That is happening on September 4th. So again, only about 126 days left to go. So, I mean,
It's going to be an interesting year for the Lions, that's for sure.
Yep,
I
can't
think
wait.
After the way last year ended, this is going to say a lot about how the next 5 years could go or so,
absolutely. All right, well, fantastic stuff. Dean and Andy, thank you both so much for stopping by once again, and we will see you all again next week.